on France 24. Time for the press review. Antonia's with us today. Staying with our main story, of course, a lot of coverage, both reporting and analysis from Lebanon you're focusing on at the beginning here today, Antonia.
That's quite right. If we look at the front page of La Croix, you can see the story that's capturing the imagination is those tens of thousands trying to flee from the south of the country. This very poignant image of a woman and a child perched on a bollard. They're surrounded by luggage as they look to leave the south. In the inside pages of Libération, you also have a very impressive image of what is not just a traffic jam, but an exodus away from southern Lebanon. And in the reporting here, you have quotations from those who are torn about the idea of leaving. You have Fatima, a nurse, who is quoted as saying that she was deciding to stay despite the danger because she works in a hospital and they need her skills. Meanwhile, Liliane is leaving with a very heavy heart in order to accompany her older relatives to safety. But she says that if she leaves, she feels she is leaving her homeland to be annexed, by a neighbour further south. In border villages, you also have testimony of residents hiding out in churches, buildings that still bear the scars of the last war with Israel just a year ago, and residents who describe receiving a warning message that also warned them that any travel within the south would put their lives in danger. So that adds another layer to this dilemma of should they stay or should they leave. L'Orient Le Jour has on the front page images of those airstrikes we've talked about in Beirut, with the headline Lebanon on the brink of a fresh invasion. On the inside pages, the journalist is hypothesizing as to what Israel's plan might be. This suggestion is that it's a ground operation, 15 kilometers deep, likely on two axes from the south and from the east, and that if successful for Israel, it would allow Israel to push harder to disarm Hezbollah and even dictate a whole new security order in southern Lebanon, including which groups could live where. In parallel, a ground offensive in Iran is not implausible, according to this author, perhaps with the help of the Kurds, which would, of course, serve to weaken Iran, which is one of Israel's objectives vis-à-vis Iran, but also vis-à-vis Lebanon, where, of course, Iran remains Hezbollah's #1 backer.
Well, meanwhile, it seems the US administration is facing some backlash for lack of clarity on its plans.
That, you might say, an understatement, lack of clarity. The New Republic has this article quoting senior Democratic lawmakers who emerged from a closed-door briefing yesterday and described complete incoherence. Senator Elizabeth Warren said it is so much worse than you thought. This after they were briefed by the administration on the details of this war. Another lawmaker described it as an illegal war that Donald Trump has no plan to end. Another came out saying they were more fearful than ever that there may be boots put on the ground, but absolutely no clearer on the administration's priorities. This, of course, as priorities have seemingly shifted from eliminating the nuclear threat to regime change, etc. Politico is describing another angle on this chaos inside the Trump administration's scramble to support its own war. Now, the article describes how the US spent weeks ramping up their military presence in the Middle East. It didn't come as a shock when it happened, but only now the State Department are sending further staff to the Mediterranean to help with civilian evacuations. They're scrambling to grow intelligence operations, sending additional troops to Central Command, and they're also now trying to ship more anti-drone defense systems to the Middle East, suggesting that, in fact, perhaps a lot of the planning may have happened far too late in the process, and suggesting that perhaps this war has taken on proportions that the administration didn't quite anticipate. Another piece in the New Republic has the political angle. The Republican meltdown over Iran is just the beginning, says this headline, suggesting that the cracks are showing as prominent voices from the MAGA sphere are speaking out against this war. Megyn Kelly said that servicemen have died not for the US but for Iran and for Israel. Tucker Carlson has said the war is disgusting and evil, that they voted for zero wars and America first, while Nick Fuentes has called has called on voters to boycott the midterms over this war. Now, the journalist's thesis is that MAGA is Trump and Trump is MAGA, but that this could be the beginning of a schism, that the administration apparently has no plan for this war, no plan to even evacuate civilians. Not entirely accurate. They are evacuating civilians, but it could be argued that's been chaotically handled. But importantly, that the MAGA camp or the Trump camp are also unprepared politically for the exodus of support from voters and lawmakers.
Something different. A new study suggests we may have underestimated current sea levels.
Yes, this is the New York Times bringing this story. New research suggests that due to widespread methodological challenges, sea levels have been inaccurately recorded worldwide, in most cases underestimated. If you look at this graphic, blue is the coastlines where we have underestimated the sea level, and orange is where they are higher than we thought. This puts hundreds of millions of more people on the front line of climate change as sea levels rise. That is something that has not been debunked. Sea levels are rising and they are already higher than we thought.
Finally from Antonia, some long-awaited good news. We really need it after this tough week of news, don't you? Some of you will have followed his trials and tribulations of Punch the monkey in a Japanese zoo. We talked about it here before. It looks like things might be looking up for him.
Yeah, so just to remind you, these are some images of Punch the monkey, who, abandoned by his mother and bullied by the group of macaque monkeys when they chased him, dragged him along the ground. His one comfort, his one companionship was his IKEA orangutan. Now, heartwarming as this story is, it's also extremely sad that the other monkeys weren't accepting him and he wasn't able to interact with him. Well, good news, and The Guardian have this story. The keepers are extremely pleased to report that he is now less dependent on the toy, interacting much more with the other monkeys, even if he still curls up with his orangutan at night time.
Oh, a nice punch to end the press review. Something at least slightly optimistic to tell you about this week here on France 24. Of course, though, after the break, we'll analyse all the main news of the day for you, so do stay with us if you can.